Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is a founding partner and coach for the professional coaching firm 3D Coaching and the author of the nonfiction book Simplifying Coaching. Additionally, she has co-written 4 other books. Her name is Claire Pedrick, and here's my interview with Claire. Claire Pedrick, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Thank you. What a pleasure to be here.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, I could say 1,000 things, couldn't I? And some of them are going to make you think I'm really important, and some of them are going to make you think I'm really normal. So actually, I'm really normal. I'm human. I've been coaching for about 30-something years, and I work with people around the world who want to have better conversations. And now I seem to keep writing books that people seem to keep reading, which is lovely.
You are the founding partner and a coach for the firm 3D Coaching. What is 3D Coaching? What types of coaching services does 3D Coaching provide? And what types of clients are 3D Coaching services intended for?
So I founded 3D Coaching in 30 years ago, and really to do 2 main things. One is to provide people with high quality coaching where they can have a space to think with a coach, where they're going to feel heard and get new insights into their own stuff in a way that is going to help them move forward. And also because a lot of people like the way we do what we do, we also train people to work in a similar way to the way that we work. So we work across organizations and with individuals. So we might be working with people in a not-for-profit. We might be working in the public sector, in the healthcare system. We might be working in the church. We might be working in international development organizations. We might be working in business. It's all sorts of people come to us because our philosophy is to say, what's the least that I need to do so that you feel heard and get new insights into your own stuff? So our work is deep and simple. And some people really like that. Some people don't.
You've written 5 books, but only one of those you've written as a solo author. So I'll start with that one. It's called Simplifying Coaching. Without spoiling too much of Simplifying Coaching, what is that book about?
Well, Simplifying Coaching is the easiest book that I've ever written. And the reason for that is that it's everything that I've learned about teaching people to have better conversations in a book. And the writing process for that only took 9 months, because basically I just downloaded what was in my head or in my soul. And it outlines some simple things that we can do to have more transformational conversations by doing less. And when I wrote it, the publisher said to me, you can't write a book if you're not clear on your audience. And we had a huge conversation about whether the audience was anybody or whether the audience was coaches. So I wrote it for coaches, but actually it's suitable for anybody. And the readers, people who read it, might be anyone who wants to have more transformational conversations by doing less. So when it first came out, I did quite a few podcasts with salespeople who recognized that there was stuff in the book that they could use to make their sales calls more transformational. So that's a no spoiler summary of Simplifying Coaching.
More recently, you co-wrote The Human Behind the Coach with Lucia Baldelli. Without spoiling too much about that book, what is it about, and who is Lucia Baldelli, and what was it like to work with her on a nonfiction book writing project?
So one of the things that happened when Simplifying Coaching came out is that people said to me, we really like the idea of doing less, but we can't do it because it's too hard. And that made me begin to wonder what needed to change in them for them to be able to change behavior in a way that they knew would be useful and that they knew was important, but they weren't able to do. And when that was happening, it was just as COVID hit. And I was mentoring Lucia, who's an Italian coach. And in the work that we were doing together, I just said to her, it feels as though the work that we're doing could make a great book. And if I'm going to use our work in a book, I think we should probably write it together, because I don't think it's right to use co-created stuff and pass it off as your own. So that's where the partnership started. And in fact, what happened was we started reading a book that was called Growing into Mastery, and it was how to become a masterful coach. And by the time we'd been writing for about 18 months, all online, she'd write a bit, I'd write a bit. We decided we didn't like the word mastery at all, and in fact, the book that was published was not at all the book that we started writing. So the human behind the coach is some things that we need to work on inside if we want to be able to work better in partnership. So silence, vulnerability, not knowing, courage, and all sorts of qualities. And that's the first half of the book. And the second half of the book is about what that looks like and sounds like in a conversation. So if you can see or hear or sense that people are in a conversation in partnership, what do you see and hear and sense? Great question about co-writing, because of course, co-writing is a great thing, and it's also not a great thing because you have to agree. So you bring really different qualities and different experiences and different writing styles. And you've got to find a way of coming to a common voice. So there's the structure of part one was really Lucia's idea. And she was really clear that this was about human qualities. And that made the book so much better as a book. I shaped the words and it's kind of written in my voice. Because you can't, either you alternate chapters, so she writes one and I write one, or you have to kind of find a common voice. So we found a common voice. And then a year ago, actually, so April 2023, we met for the first time in person on a writing retreat. We took ourselves to an Airbnb in Lake Garda in Italy. And it was really to shape the final manuscript. But when we got there, we realized that a whole load of it needed to be rewritten. So we absolutely worked. In England, we say we worked our socks off. We worked our socks off for 2 weeks to get a draft together. And then I went back to Italy in May last year and to do another writing retreat to finalize the manuscript. So that was lovely.
After writing Simplifying Coaching, what made you write The Human Behind the Coach?
Well, people were saying, what's your next book going to be about? Which, of course, they're now saying that again. But the big motivator was that there was a gap and we had to, so it's almost that The Human Behind the Coach is the prequel. So if you were to read them, it would be probably better to read The Human Behind the Coach first and then Simplifying Coaching second, because one of them is about the internal shift that we need to make, and then Simplifying Coaching is kind of technical ideas about how to do really top quality conversations.
You've co-authored 3 other books: How to Make Great Appointments in the Church, Friends First, and Under Pressure. Without spoiling too much of those 3 books, what are they about?
So How to Make Great Appointments in the Church is for churches to think about what is it that they need to know and understand in order to be able to recruit a new priest, minister, vicar, pastor, whatever you call it, church leader. And there's stuff in that book as well for ministers, pastors, leaders, vicars who are looking for a new role. And it's about helping people to really be clear where they are now so that they can be then clear about what kind of a person are they looking for. So that was that one. Friends First and Under Pressure came because I was writing the problem page for some Christian material for teenagers. And they asked me to turn some of that into a book. So Friends First is about relationships, and it's really aimed at, 12 to 16-year-olds. It's interesting because I wrote that nearly 20 years ago, and probably then it was aimed at 14 to 18-year-olds. But, society changes, so now it would be aimed at 12 to 16-year-olds. But I asked them not to republish it because I think it was a book for its time. And I think that if I was to write a book like that now, it would be completely different. And then Under Pressure was a book for teenagers about managing stress and pressure.
Are all your books self-published, traditionally published, or hybrid published, or did you use different publishing methods for your books?
What have you got? So the first three were commissioned by conventional publishers. So Friends First and Under Pressure, the publisher came to me and said, will you write it? So I said, yes. That was also true with How to Make Great Appointments. So 5 books, 4 publishers. Simplifying Coaching, I was never going to write that as a book. And then the publisher approached me, McGraw-Hill, which is one of the biggest academic publishers in the world. And when somebody comes up to you who's responsible for the coaching titles in their publishing house and says, have you got a book you'd like to write for us? You don't say no. So Simplifying Coaching was published by McGraw-Hill. And because it was a conventional publisher, we had to use the font and the layout that they use in that series. And what it means is that although Simplifying Coaching is a very straightforward book, and people say, the reviews on Amazon often say, it's the only coaching book I have ever understood. So it's written in a very straightforward way, but the lines are very close together and it has very little white space around the outside. So I went back to them and said, I've got another book. And they went, great. And we then had a dialogue about whether we could have a different layout, and they were not able to do that for us. So the human behind the coach is partnership publishing. So it's published by Practical Inspiration. So we paid a sum up front. And Practical Inspiration is run by an amazing woman called Alison Jones, who used to work for Pan Macmillan. And she really deeply understands the publishing process. So it was professionally edited. It's got professional cover. We had all the benefits that I had when I went to a traditional publisher, but I did have to pay money for it. But then you get more money back per copy. And I'm in the process of doing a book proposal for a new book. And in fact, I'm going back to McGraw-Hill because they are now able to be flexible about white space and font, which means that readers who are neurodivergent will be able to read a book that's published by them. And the next book needs to go with an academic publisher. So we're going back to McGraw-Hill as long as they say yes to the proposal, which I think they will. So a mixture is the answer to your question.
How are you a disruptor in your profession as a professional coach? And what does it feel like to be a disruptor in your profession?
Well, I'm a disruptor because how I describe coaching is a lot more straightforward than how you will hear it described by many people. And if you see me coaching or if you hear me coaching, you'll hear that I don't do very much, so that the other person does a lot. And I'm in a profession which likes theory and likes complexity. And so in my profession, and also complexity, you can charge money for complexity. So if I say I have a special way of doing this and it's very complicated and very special and very elite, I can charge you a lot of money to train with me. But actually what I say is you probably don't need me very much. And actually, if you make it less simple, you're going to have more transformational conversations, but you're going to do less. So the profession says that we add value by doing more. And I say that unless we learn that we can't add value by trying to add value, then we won't add value. So it's very dissonant. It's quite fun. For a long time, I thought these things, but didn't dare say them out loud because I thought that I would. Well, first of all, I wasn't sure. I thought I was right, but I wasn't sure I was right. And I was not really given a place to say, to be public about it. So people would come for training. They'd really like it. Organizations would commission us to do stuff because it was straightforward and it was easy for their people to understand and transformational for them to apply. But I have to say, I had a huge level of anxiety when Simplifying Coaching was published because I wasn't sure what the profession were going to say about it. But apart from one 1-star review on Amazon, it's had mostly 5-star reviews and really amazing press. And lots of coach training schools now use it as a text. So being a disruptor is lovely, except when you wonder what people are going to say to you.
Some of our listeners may be confused between the difference between mentoring and coaching. What are some differences between mentoring and coaching?
Well, one of them is saying, I've done that before. Let me tell you what I did. And the other one is saying, let me have a conversation with you so that you can think about it for yourself and come up with your own solution. And I'm not going to affix a word to either of those because some people use one word for one and one word for the other, and they're not always the same. But what's important, I think, is to recognize that they're different. And one of the differences is about power. So one of them says, I know something you don't know, and I'm going to give it to you. And the other one says, I fully believe that you can work this out for yourself with some support and with me being here with you to help you to do that. And, you know, sometimes we have conversations that are a mixture of the two, but they would be the two differences for me.
You host a podcast called The Coaching In. What do listeners expect from a typical episode of your podcast?
Oh, I love my podcast. I hope you love yours.
Yes.
Good. So my podcast is a virtual English pub. So English pubs are a very English thing. So it's like a bar, but it's not like a bar. So they're sort of slow and people gather and they have conversations. So the Coaching In is a place for people to gather and have conversations. And what I want it to feel like is that you're listening to me having a conversation with someone else who I've just met for the first time. So about coaching or leadership or work or something like that. And I ask my guests not to prepare. And the idea is that we just arrive and we just talk as though we've met for the first time. And generally that works really, really well. And now I have the most extraordinary guests. So one week I might have someone who's written a bestseller of 1 million books. And then the next week, I might have somebody who's home educating their children and who's talking about how in home educating their children, what they're actually doing is coaching and enabling their kids to do their own learning. So it's really mixed and that's what people love. And sometimes we have open tables where we have a few people talking about stuff. And our listeners just listen in on really interesting conversations. And some of them they love. And of course, some of them they think, oh, no, I want to move on from this conversation and not listen to the rest. But it's just a very informal 30 minutes, 35 minutes. Way of hearing people in dialogue about something.
Before I ask the final question, I'm going to note that what is called motor neuron disease in the UK is more commonly called Lou Gehrig's disease or ALS here in the United States. But how did you accidentally raise over 100,000 pounds sterling for the Motor Neuron Disease Association in the UK? And
win an award from the British Prime Minister for doing it. My next door neighbor was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, motor neuron disease, as was the father of my daughter's best friend the same week. And most people die within 2 years of getting it. And I just felt really strongly that with two people so close to us that I needed to do something, and I didn't really know what to do. So I just said to John's wife, the Ellie's friend's stepdad, I said, I think I'd like to do a sponsored walk. And John was an entrepreneur. He died in 2019. 2.5 years after he was diagnosed. But I said to them, I'd love to do a sponsored walk or something. And John went, oh, no, you need to do something bigger than that. So I said, okay, how about I do a sponsored walk every month for a year? So he went, no, you need to do something bigger than that. So I went, okay, how about I do a sponsored walk every month for a year and Margaret said she'd come. So I said, we get 8 other people to come with us. So that's 10 people a month for a year. So we started. And where we lived, there was a walk around the town that was half marathon, 13.5 miles, 13.6 miles. And we set off on the first month. I put the dates out, put them on Facebook, set up a donating page, Just Giving. And we were getting £1,000 a week really quickly of people donating. And by the time we'd finished the first year, there were, 200 people had walked with us in that year. And then we went on tour. We went and did the Bridges of London walk. And then 4 of us went on tour. And in 2022, we walked the Spanish Camino, which is 600 kilometers, which is about 500 miles over 5 or 6 weeks in September 2022. And when you're that mad, people give money because I think they don't want to do it themselves. They go, my goodness, I couldn't do that. Let me give you money. So, yeah, we raised over £100,000 sterling and our fundraising is still open and people still drop money into it every so often. But it was a beautiful focus in a time of really difficult stuff. So every month we would gather together and Pete and John, who both had it, would, for as long as they were able, would be there. John was there every single walk. And to start with, he was there on walking sticks. And by the time we finished the walks at the end of that first year, he was in a motorized wheelchair. And he was encouraging everybody. And we kind of made it into a branded thing. So John would send me a message in the middle of the month and go, this month, everybody's going to wear orange sunglasses. And he'd have ordered 100 pairs of orange sunglasses from eBay. So when everybody turned up, they all had orange sunglasses on. And then the next month, we all had to wear blue wigs. And it was just the best thing. And it was something for them to look forward to every month. It was a way of raising awareness. It was a way of having fun. It was a way of raising money. It was amazing. I'm the most proud of that than almost anything else I've done in my whole life, including all my books.
Claire, thank you for appearing on Apollo Papyrus. You were an insightful guest.
Thank you.
Claire was one of the most insightful people I've ever had the opportunity to interview for this podcast. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.